Force and Sweet, a Life and Lorcana podcast, although today, probably just going to be talking about Lorcana. How are you, Harlan?
I'm very, very good, thank you. It was a really fun Store Champs weekend. It was really nice to get back into them. I didn't try too hard at the Madriel ones because I was more focused on DLCs and Continentals, but really good fun last weekend. How about
I've had
yourself?
quite the opposite experience. I've been busy with other things in life, and with no DLCs, I have not attended a Store Champ since the Media Set Champs one. You know, I got my mat, I got my card. I don't really feel any motivation to play more because, to be honest, there's not
Oh,
really
wow.
any of the decks that I own the cards to that I'd want to play right now.
Yeah, no, I can feel that. And I'll admit, even for me, I was playing a little bit, I wouldn't say sloppy, but like less motivated because like just winning the mat took the
Mm.
bit of the sail out of my wind, like the wind out of my sail. Sorry, that's the right saying. So I was like, I tried the no wheel that you played as well, on the Sunday. I got one win and the other win was a bye, that day. So the deck really wasn't for me that day. Like I drew two games, like four uninkables in a row, where it was just like one inkable to get
Mm.
me back in the game.
Yeah.
You have those days. But I can't really blame the deck too much. Like I really wasn't feeling it much that Sunday either.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with that deck specifically, it's a fun deck, but I've played a good amount of it, and to me, I want to feel like I'm attacking the meta, I'm countering it in a new way. But if there's no big tournament to be worth investing money into buying cards in, because I'm a bit cash strapped, it's just there's less motivation for me to try hard and be like, yo, let's try and figure out what's the best deck to play. But I mean, I still try and keep up to date with the meta. I think it'd be a whole different story if I was going to Melbourne, right? If I was still had a chance to compete for the World
Yeah.
Championships and I'm preparing for the Melbourne DLC in 2 weeks, I'd be locked in hard practicing. But for now, I think I'm on a bit of a Lorcana vacay almost until we get some set 7 reveals, and then we can start brewing those and thinking how the new meta is going to look.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think I've gone quite the opposite way of like there is no big DLC or event to build towards. So right now as store champs, that's all you've got. So I'm
Mm.
hitting them quite hard. But yeah, it easily could be a time where you get downtime. Maybe a lot of people as well in their downtime like to learn another deck just to see how it plays. Maybe a deck you're losing against, like Ruby Sapphire. You can just play some games of it so you learn how it works and everything. But yeah, store champs for me right now.
Yeah, well, how are store champs going? You're more in touch with me, so is there anything we should be talking about today?
Yeah, so I played Saturday. I played Sunday, got a top four and a top eight. And Mrs. Sweetie, as I put around on Twitter, managed to win on the Sunday with the Sapphire Steel aggro list, which was awesome. It was really great to see. I was really proud of her as well. Like she's gonna be playing about 6 months, like just TCGs in general. So it was also really cool. I kind of didn't want to like take it away from her because I was also really impressed with
Yeah.
the deck as well. I was like really impressed with her. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. We'll celebrate. But also like, wow, this deck's really good. Like someone who's new to TCGs, they put the work in and they managed to go on and win something with it as well and like achieve a goal for them. So I was like, that's awesome. But yeah, really in the Store Champs realm, of course, I've been checking a lot of ink decks. I've been seeing everyone on Twitter, like everyone's been posting. And even at both the ones I played at, Twitter, ink decks, Ruby Sapphire, and Doc Mine, Steel Song, have been the most popular decks by far. They seem to be ruling it, and it seems to be down to locally, like, do you have some really good Ruby Sapphire players, or do you have some really good, Doc Mine, Amber
Mm.
Steel sort of players? And that's kind of where it's been landing with Store Champs. You get these local legends, don't you? Like you have your local legendary Amber Steel player or whatever, and they're doing really well because they've got the cards they needed this set. Which also I'm going to say has been very interesting for how hyped purple has been this set. They're saying every purple deck's so amazing, but in my opinion, Steel Songs or Amber Steel and Ruby Sapphire have just been outperforming like all the purple decks.
Harlan, I want to take us off note for a second. I'm having a look at so as you say, you're playing with Sapphire Steel deck, right? To circle back, the Sapphire Steel
Mm.
aggro deck specifically. Why on ink decks is your deck called Kiwi Birds?
Yeah, no, I was waiting for you to notice that as as our Kiwi. So when we were testing it in our testing group, whenever me and Justin's the actual creator of the deck, we would sit in a voice call and we would just like play it all night and like test it in like different varieties. And some of our other testing mates said we look like Kiwi birds, like the little birds crossing the road or like walking around, and they did this sort of funny little walk. So when I had to name the deck, I just called it
Okay,
Kiwi
because you
Birds.
looked like a kiwi bird walking along while you're sitting there
I,
playing.
I think it was just like, yeah, I think it was just like a funny joke. I think because we all like, there was like more that it wasn't just me and Just enjoying. There was like others as well, and we looked like someone just called us Kiwi Birds. Dave, if Dave ever listens to us, it's him
Mm.
who said it. And then they just started, in our little group chats for where we test gifs of Kiwi Birds got spammed, and everything like that. So I was like, hey, let's just call it Kiwi Birds. And someone made the joke, it's kind of like you're all trying to get across the line to the finish line with lore, because every turn you play a card and you turn it
Mm.
sideways, and that's pretty much the deck. Um, there is not much depth to that. There is no connection really to the playstyle, to the deck, besides that
So
kind
if
of
you
little joke.
lose, are you like the kiwi bird
Um,
going off a cliff and then it remembers it can't fly?
yeah, I guess we would be. Yeah, yeah. But it's been nice because like everyone else who picks up the deck, they're like, oh, I'm one of the Kiwi birds and
Uh,
stuff like that. So yeah,
yeah,
it's
because
just a
you've
cute
also
little
got
nickname.
two others by a
It's
player called Voidrix, but also called it kiwi birds in their submissions.
Yeah, yeah. Who's also I think one of the other players, I think might be in Germany or maybe
Mm.
America, has been performing very well. And what I've liked as well is like me and Justin's put the time in with this deck. We've practiced it a lot, but I've actually seen players go on and make some changes to it, minor changes probably for their local scene. And like it's been really interesting to learn from that as well. Because we can take that information in. It's just more
Yeah,
people
no,
playing
you
the
just
deck, isn't
always
it?
want
You
more
get
more
more
data points. Yeah,
data.
it's kind of like how when Zan
Yeah,
was testing for Vegas, he just gave out his green steel deck to a ton of people, to try and get as much data as possible on where the deck was working and where it wasn't, or just any fresh ideas.
mm. So it's been really good. I mean, some of the things they've tested have been cards we previously tested and ruled out, but there was cards like Twin Fire and Fire the Cannons, which we thought were very good in specific meta, so they've obviously
Hmm.
put them in for that. Some people have added more Baymaxes. I'm like, yeah, if you haven't got a very big Ruby scene, please put more Baymax in, because of course Brawl can
Yeah,
instantly answer it, and Sisu's going to have a lovely time with that. But my girlfriend, when she played yesterday after the event, she said she's become such a TCG grinder as well. The first thing she started talking about after the win was like how to improve
that's
the
great.
deck. It was like, yeah, yeah, it was great. She was like, yeah, I think we need less of this card and we need more Baymaxes. And I was like, that's cool. But then she didn't face any Ruby that day. It was like green, purple, blurple,
Uh,
amber, steel song and stuff like that. So it was like, if you don't have a day of Ruby, there was Ruby in the room, but the RB's got a mirror around one, and I think they just had a bad run from there on out. Um, but yeah, I was like, if you don't play into it, of course you're going to want more Baymaxes. So you could, and then with the store champs as well, like when you turn up, you could scout the room fairly easily and then go, there's no Ruby here, or maybe there's one, and then you could up count the like Baymaxes. So store champs are always interesting to me. Like it's such a small environment, isn't it?
I
You have to
do
perform
think
in.
that's sort of maybe antithetical to learning, though, if you're practicing for a DLC or just practicing for more serious tournaments in general, because you're not really going to be able to, scout a tournament on the morning and change a couple of cards here and there. And I think you get a lot better learning of how to predict a meta from not playing into the knowing your local scene really well too much. But it depends on what you care more about. If you just care more about short-term gains and just winning that map, then go read your scene and take advantage of that knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, if you just want to win like a store champs, or maybe your locals puts on a winner box and you're like, oh right, I know my locals is really
Hmm.
big on Steel Song, put some more Baymaxes in. But of course, what I like to do is, even if the room, like you're saying right now for DLCs and bigger events, if the room's not even big on that, I still like to learn to play with that number of cards in my deck. So like, you have two Baymaxes in there. It'd be really good if I had four, but for a DLC, I'm going to
Yeah,
run two, aren't
exactly.
I? So it's learning to play with that number of cards in the deck, even if it's not to your benefit. It's the knowledge and the
Yeah, because
practice
if you're
is good as
playing
well.
against a bad matchup, you don't want to play against a version of your deck that's teched for it, because that's not the deck you're going to bring if that matchup isn't very popular. You just want to learn, how can I still win
Mm.
anyway? What are the lines I can take without that extra advantage that I could put in? But with deck building, it's always the opportunity cost of, I can help this deck, but it will make me worse against these other decks.
Yeah, and with the store champs as well, like I'll be surprised if you don't run into like a Jafar
Yeah,
wheel or a red
Something
Fasa.
crazy.
But like, would you ever? I saw people like messaging me saying like, "How are you beating Mufasa?" I'm like, I don't think I thought about that deck once when I was testing. I think I've played it into it twice, and they got like Rhea, and that was the only new card they really could play. So I was like, yeah, I'm just not thinking
If
about Mufasa. And if you play your store
if
champs,
someone
I'm
brings
sorry.
Mufasa to store champs, let them have their rogue deck surprise factor. I'm not testing 100 games into
Yeah.
that to figure out the optimal lines. That's just such a waste of time.
And I'm definitely not. Yeah, and I'm definitely not putting cards in the deck to try and beat
Right.
Mufasa
Yeah.
because when I go to a DLC, I'm not going to see the
Exactly.
deck. Yeah.
All right. So talked about the blue steel list. What have you seen that's winning overall? It's always hard to know at these store champs because not everyone submits their deck, and we don't have centralized forms of data, which would be amazing if we could just scrape it from Melee, right? But unfortunately, we don't. So what is the meta looking like as we know it from what we've seen online?
Yeah. So sort of what I've seen in the Twitter environment and in ink decks and stuff like that, and of course locally it is Ruby Sapphire and Amber Steel, preferably the
Mm.
dock build. But actually, the more I looked, it was appearing that just Amber Steel in general is good. I think that might be because Amber Steel, the control list,
Mm-hmm.
Vanessa on two, the Ursula card. That's very good into the dock mines. You just get to play Zeus's and stuff like that
Yeah.
at such a cheap cost. But it's preferably been Dock Mines and Ruby Sapphire, and I think Ruby Sapphire takes quite the skill to play, but if you master it, it's a hyper control deck. Why would that not win every event, Of course, you're going to have a bit of luck, you're going to have to build it
Mm.
properly, but yeah, there's no reason. Ruby Sapphire is always going to be a very represented deck in the room. But Dock Mines, I played a bit and tested of it as well because my friend who doesn't play very much won the Saturday store champs. He was just asking what's the. He was a Bucky player for a while. And also, if he listens to this is no disrespect to him. He's a very good player. He was a Bucky player for a while, and will describe himself as a meta chaser. He wants to play the best deck in the room. So he played Bucky, and then he's kind of been lost for swords. He's won on green steel, and I said Dock Mines right now is like play your curve, play a dock, and keep putting bodies on the board. So I think it's also fairly easy to pick up as well. And I ended up playing a bit myself, and I was like, yeah, I could see why you could just roll a store champs with this. You're constantly making your opponent like have to answer your board. You can sing removal at such a cheap cost. You only have to get to like 4 ink half of the games as well. So yeah, it's just really really strong right now. And the like granddaddy of the best deck of Lorcana, the one that's been around for so long and wins everything. It won both Continentals. Ruby-Amethyst. It has a terrible matchup into that. We know Ed's build wasn't built for it, but that was really like he got O2'd by a
Yeah.
Continentals, didn't he? And he will say it's hard. Even if you tech for it, it's quite hard. The Lilo recursion's really rough. It kind of is a way to play around Be Prepared. So they have to include things like Big Sisu and stuff like that, the 8-cost Sisu. So yeah, I think that deck's the deck for store champs right
Mm.
now.
I mean, yeah, so that's a very good point you bring up. Hopefully, we will have had that deck on the screen for the last few minutes while talking about it. There's a few key cards on this list specifically that I think would be interesting to talk about. We've got the 2 Baloo, which, as you mentioned before the podcast, is quite good in the mirror, because when you're racing for lore, and let's say you're going second in the mirror, in a deck as straightforward as this, it's going to be hard to find your edge in order to gain more lore than your opponent. But Baloo specifically can help you almost like ramp, right? Gain lore a little bit faster, and maybe even protect your board, hopefully, to the point that you might be able to reach 20 first, even when going second in a mirror. So I think that's a very, very strong tech card when this is one of the most played decks in the meta. But also the one Guntu, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I think much for the same reasons as why blue is good, Guntu is probably bad, because unlike in the blue steel deck where we can apply ward to the Guntu to give it some survivability, I think in this case it's just going to lose to a strength or maybe just 2 pings of damage. But really, just the strength is the big thing. Mines plus Storm is also very viable to remove it, and unless you're going against a Ruby deck that doesn't have Ice Cubes, such as Ruby-Amethyst, I just don't think it's a very strong card. Maybe you're not giving up a lot if you're playing it as a one-off, but maybe it's just, rather than playing it, you play something else like a 3rd Baloo, right? Or a 4th Lawrence for more consistency.
Yeah. And a lot of these lists, I'm going to assume, are working very much backwards from the
Mm.
Candio's list from Continentals, which he did have a one-off Gantu in as well. Of course, this one it does have Happy in it. Yeah, sorry, I thought I'd missed him on the list. I was going to talk about that, but it does have Happy in it. But even Candy, I think he dropped it down to 2. So I think what a lot of people have done is took that list that had like a one-off Big Cinderella, one-off Gantu, and then it had a few what they call Kedas. And someone's probably took that and went, maybe they don't have the Kedas or whatever, or maybe they've just thought, I don't like playing with these cards, I'm going to change it out for some other stuff, and that's where some of these lists have landed. But I think Blue is really good. We had someone on Saturday run the Donald Duck, that one you know the bodyguard one. It's like a 2/3. I don't know what it's called. I don't know what its like actual name is called. But the issue with that is you play it, you bodyguard, you give something quest 1. That's great. But it's not as good as Baloo, I think, in my opinion, because Baloo, even when he's answered,
He's gaining value.
gives
Lore,
you
yeah.
2 lore. Yeah, so and even later on in the game, he's reach like against Ruby-Amethyst, you could throw him down as well, and if he's removed, he's the same way the goat is. He puts a really big question on the board of like they're either going to quest with this next turn, or you can take it out now and they get their 2. And it really creates a weird board state that I just prefer way more than like a Donald Duck bodyguard or something.
And also, like, the only deck in the game right now that can sort of ignore the blue is yellow-green by putting it to the bottom of the deck and not banishing it. And let's be real, when are you seeing a yellow-green when you're playing this deck? Unless you're at, like, Kawa's locals,
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to ever run into much Amber Emerald.
No, I think you could say like Kit as well, and maybe some Muses, but like you could get to a point where you could just play it, and then you see a lot of players will attack it themselves. It used to be the Zeus on it, wouldn't it? Or you could play Strength on it and just take your 2 lore. So like I just think he's good, and at this version as well, it's only a 2 count. I have felt when I built my version of this, I went a bit more. I think it was like 16 uninkables because you're only really needing to like 4, 4 or 5 ink really, and then you're set. So I feel you can go a bit more risky on them.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then once you start playing this deck, like the play patterns are so simple. It's like you want that Cinderella or that Daisy turn 1, depending if you want to control or aggro the board. You play your 2-drop, then you might double spell and play a 1-drop and a 2-drop, and then when you get to dock, you just keep going through the cards, and you can get to learn those Rapunzel play patterns as well. And it feels like it just plays itself sometimes. You just have to play the 2 cards that are in your hand that Doc gave you, and you win the game.
Yeah, which I think is great for set championships, especially if you're new to the game, with like with more limited decisions. If you're very new to the game, I think this kind of deck is quite strong. Whereas if you want to, start learning some of the more complicated decks, you probably move away from it. But if you're just all about winning, this deck's very positioned well in the meta, and you can just take down a store champ with minimal effort. Really, it's quite a linear game plan, as you say.
Yeah, and I mentioned I think they were called. I can't remember what they was called. There was a podcast that was streaming their store champs, and the final was this deck versus the Doc Mines deck versus my Sapphire Steel aggro. And yeah, no, I had that same thought as well. It was like I'm going to keep plugging my Sapphire Steel list because that's what I do. I think you could have picked up either of those 2 decks, and it's proven that both of them can win store champs. And they're very linear in what they do. You play your curve out, don't you? And then you just get your lore, and you try and close the game out. I think they're very easy to pick up. They could very much give you results. And there's also that ability that you could learn it a lot deeper as well. There's a lot of depth. Like, Candio's going to play mines a lot better than I'm going to play mines, And, that's for every deck. And then if you wanted to, you could go to more complex decks like Ruby Sapphire that I also mentioned is winning a lot of these store champs. So a lot of those players that have moved to that deck have been rewarded quite a lot because they've got way more options, way more agency in games. They've got Pirate's Life in there. They've got Maui Shark. They can take in loads of early control if they want to. So yeah. But it was that really good thought of I think Doc Mines and my Sapphire Steel aggro list, like they're very good ways to get you into this game. Like if you're hoping to play competitively.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the red-blue deck now, funnily enough, this red-blue deck looks almost identical to the one that I brought to VLCQ, if you remember. Now the only difference is that instead of a certain tech card I was playing that was Hook at one point but wasn't Hook and is now Hideaway here, honestly cannot remember for the life of me. But the key thing being, they're down to free brawl. Key thing being, you have, you have 2 Pirates Life, right? free Ice Block, free big Sisu, 2 to 3 small Sisu, and then a Medusa. So this is the version of the deck, and some sharks you can recycle for Pirate's Lives and other things. Oh yeah, Let It Go was the tech card I had instead of Hideaway. So Hideaway is good for the mines, it's good for Dime, but it's mainly for the mines, and you're going to be able to recycle it through Shark. Pirate's Life is going to extend your life in the game, so if they are racing lore through things like Baloo, once you clear it, you can just sing Pirate's Life and reduce their lore while gaining your own lore, +3, -2 with a shark on the board, right? So this is a deck that's very, very well positioned to take on the Amber Steel decks, which are countering the red-purple that became the hot thing after Ed 1 with it. So I think this just goes to show that as much as you want to pick the best deck in the room and just follow the meta deck, I think everyone with that mindset is always going to be one step behind the meta. Because at the end of the day, Disney Lorcana is a very well-balanced game. We've never really had a tier 0 deck, so you can't just pick the best deck. You might be able to in some other card games. So I think when people realized that red-purple had won the tournament, lots of people were going to play red-purple. They moved to Amber Steel because Amber Steel countered it well. And then obviously a lot of players went, hey, if people are moving to Amber Steel, I can bring red-blue and counter Amber Steel. And in this case, this deck does that very, very well.
Yeah. I think there is that rock, paper, scissors because we saw that going into Continentals. Like, a lot of the Steel Song died down because Ruby Sapphire was looking so popular. And that was probably the right decision for those Steel Song players because it was like 30% of the room. But Ruby Sapphire's got so many strengths. And what I've learned as well recently playing into Ruby Sapphire, I mean, not using my aggro list, using like Ruby-Amethyst and using like no-wheel Sapphire Steel, is how much like stronger this deck got. Like, this version has 4 Maui Sharks, but it used to be you saved your Hades for the Tamatoa, that came out. But now it's like, well, I kind of need it for the Maui Shark. And then, like, you don't have that many answers. And even with Ruby-Amethyst, it's like, yeah, you can bounce the Tremaine, but like, well, I need to Tremaine the Maui Shark and the Tamatoa, and probably a Sisu if it even gets on board. And like, they've just got so much top end now. I think the Maui Shark just gave them another thing that has to be dealt with, and it's on turn 6.
The Maui Shark can get the win, just a lot slower than Tamatoa, so it's a very viable threat on its own, and it's also a reactive card at the same time, because you can recycle those defensive cards like Be Prepared, like Pirate's Life. And you can also just use it to recycle value, like How Far I'll Go, while slowly gaining lore. So I think Maui Shark was like, if you think of this as a sandwich, Maui Shark was like the butter, right? Like, it just made everything a bit more consistent and amplified its power a little bit. And, I mean, a really, really solid addition to the deck. It's also why I think red-blue right now can be built for any meta pretty much. If you are a master of red-blue and you know what meta you're going into, you can just build the deck a certain way. If you're going into a high-value meta, then you go more into the single target removal, the Tamatoas, and you play the Dime. Right now we're in a low to the ground meta, so you don't play the Dime. You go more into like the Sisus, the Ice Blocks, the big Sisus, and that's how you're going to be able to adapt.
Yeah, like, this list completely has gone full reactive, hasn't it? I've just noticed, no dimes. It's like, let's just control the board, completely lock it out, and then we'll get our lore, don't worry. Like, we've got lore pips on these characters. Maui Shark will get us some. Tamatoa can turn sideways. We do have quite a lot of items there. And also as well, how many like viable 1-drop items are in Ruby Sapphire these days? Like, of course, you want Popsicle on 1 majority of the time, like 90% of the time, maybe an Ice Block once or twice. But like, when do they miss the 1-drop item into turn 2 ramp, into turn 3 Hiram? Like, that just seems like it's so consistent these days as well.
Consistent. Yeah, especially with Sail now. Sail is just, again, another consistency piece, but made this deck feel so much better. So many plays are amplified by the use of Sail. And yeah, I just think it's become a better option than 1 jump in most cases.
Yeah, for sure. We did see 1 jump used a little bit in Continentals. The only benefit is Tippo can sing it and you don't lose a card from your hand, but Sail gives you a card.
I think
so. And these lists running like 13 uninkables, it's fine if it's a
So 1 jump specifically is better in high uninkable decks and is better in slower metas where it's just more about ramping as much as you can, as quick as you can. So in a red-blue meta, you'd probably see more 1 jump, maybe a mix of Sail and 1 jump. I think in this case, though, when you need speed, you need tempo, and you want to maintain your hand size, Sail is very, very strong.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so shall we move on?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about Amber Steel, we've talked about Red-Blue. These are the 2 decks we're dominating, and we talked a little bit, we brushed over it, how Red-Purple had sort of fallen over meta because it's being countered. But if you still wanted to play red-purple, how could you adapt Ed's champion winning list in order to adapt to this meta, right? In order to, move away from the red-blue filled rooms and very specific meta that NA Champs was into a more open field that Store Champs are. In this case, we have Haaland's interpretation. You are still running... Well, actually, you're only running 10 1-drops, not the 12 1-drops, right?
Yeah, I really hope Ed never sees this. Yeah, so of course, Ed's thing, it misses the Elses and the Maoris, and if the room is quite, aggro based, and you don't get that aggression with the Fox and the Crab early on, you kind of, you're not going to do anything until you get to 6, where you get the Red Ladies out, and then the B prep, of course. So the first thing is that you drop 2 of the 1-drops. I was like 10. I think I still consistently hit it with 10, and then just put 2 Elses in. And then 2 Maoris in as well to control the board. And we just did some cutting there. We just cut 1 Tremaine and 1 Library, which of course, this is why I hope Ed never sees this, because I'm going completely against what his list is doing, with locking out the board and like getting the library set down to just constantly get card draw, and then getting the Tremaines out to start controlling the board. Yeah, it's a lot of not what he wants from his list. The only reason I built this was I didn't own a playset of Genies. And I was like, oh, cool, an RP list that has no Genies. I know it was a very tailor-made deck for an event, but I'll just bring it to locals. It somehow does all right into mirrors. You just have to really look for your brawls. Like, you can't let them go crazy with a Genie. But then you get to that point where you're getting the library down and you're playing Be Prepared and you're playing the Tremaines and stuff. So you actually get into a fairly good spot there. But yeah, and I've got Medusas in there instead of Sisus. Don't know why. We're just doing that right now. So this hasn't been too bad. I mean, I think at a Store Champs level as well, like Ruby-Amethyst has always been that deck where if you're just decent at Lorcana, it just works for you because you have an option to do anything. You can aggro some matchups, you can control them, you can do whatever you really want. It goes either way. So yeah, this has been sort of fine. I'm never any RP like if I'm not sees this, I'm gonna be worried as well. Like this is just some small changes that I think would really help me in like a local environment, and that's based on what I see locally in my area in England.
I think this is maybe still a pretty decent list for the red-blue matchups that we're seeing while also adapting to a more open field. I think if you're predicting a lot of Amber Steel, people are following the meta, realize that Amber Steel's winning a lot of set champs, you'd maybe shift the deck into being more reactive to load of the ground. So you'd probably cut down on some of those Tremaines, bring in some big Sisus, and then you have a larger mix of removal. And again, maybe the Genies... You'd run a split with the rabbits and the Genies, but I mean also because I think cutting them entirely worked for red-blue because red-blue has very efficient answers to it. But when you're playing against a load of the ground decks that don't have answers to Genies, it's a good amount of tempo, right? It's an evasive, it can do lore, and especially in the mirror, I think Genie is very, very strong.
Yeah, I think if you enter a room and you expect to see maybe 1 Ruby Sapphire, and maybe you hope they get knocked out anyway because there's loads of aggro decks, you definitely put the Genies back in. But I do find Genies just quite a bad card into Ruby Sapphire, isn't it? That's why, of course, Ed didn't play any. It's so expensive and it's just going to get brawled. Whereas with the Rabbit, you're going to bounce it and you get your 2 card draw, so that's fine. But yeah, Genie's in here for the loads of the ground matchups, like especially any that aren't red decks because they're not going to really have a particularly good answer for it. Maybe some of the steel decks will. But yeah, I think you'd find some room for Genie. I kind of just liked playing a 4 rabbits, if anyone out there, of course I play Sapphire still, like there's nothing else to do in my life. I do still play quite a bit of Ruby-Amethyst, but this set I kind of hadn't really jumped into it because I was practicing so hard for Continentals. And now I've picked it up again. I'm kind of confused with the ratios on the rabbits and the Genies, I wish someone would give me like a definitive answer, but it doesn't seem there is one. So I was like, I really liked that there was 4 rabbits, so I just stuck with 4 rabbits.
I don't think there is a definitive answer. I think, as you say, if you go for a split, it lets you maybe have rabbits for some matchups and maybe have Genies for other matchups, whereas they're both cards but are fairly similar to each other. So it's not going to be a big issue if you get the wrong one for that matchup. But let's say the meta's quite fast and without much, red ruby removal, you'd probably just go 4 Genie. In the case where it's exclusively red-blue, you'd probably just go 4 rabbit, like Ed did. Whereas if you're going for a more open field, it's not like it's going to hurt you to just go 4 rabbit because it's still a very, very, very solid card. But maybe you'd be missing out on some of the tempo lines you could be going for to just win quickly off lore, and you're more forcing yourself into playing the grindy resource game if you're playing just 4 rabbits.
Yeah. I mean, this set for Ruby-Amethyst, like, so basically, whenever I play it, I have Sapphire Steel built, and that's the one I always constantly am tinkering with and testing with. And then I just basically look at what No I'm Not's building for Ruby-Amethyst and just have that built on the sides because I like to play it
Mm.
sometimes at locals. But this set, like, there's been so many changes. Like, before it used to, the only thing that would change around is like Tremaine and Medusa numbers would go up and down. Maybe locations might change around a little bit, and you might have some fun with a Rafiki one drop instead of one of the other one drops. But for the fundamental core, like the deck stayed the same. But this time around, like so how many one drops is good? Do we want as many as Green Purple does with like 12? How many crabs do you want? Elsa and Maori, like the ratios in everyone's lists always seem so far different. Now and then you've got the genie and the
Yeah,
rabbits now
library
as
versus
well.
castle.
Um, Library versus Castle and B prep numbers as well. Like I'm not even getting onto that. Like that always seems to change by the end of the set. Like people go down on how many you need. Like they go to like
Big
three or instead of
CC.
four. So like this set at Big Caesar as well. Like I actually don't own any Big Caesar. That's probably why I've got the Medusas in here. But yeah, it's like, is that a good inclusion or not? Because the shift is really powerful. And even on top of that, like Maui Shark, like I think Noam not ran Maui Shark in his list. So like we're this far in, and he ran it at like one of the biggest events of the year for him. So like that card still isn't out of question for people to include it in this deck. You could even have a one-off Pirate's Life. There's so much you can do with Ruby Amethyst now, where it's not just like this stock deck that I can have built on the side anymore. Like I actually really had to put the practice into figure out how to play it. And I bring this back to my point of Ruby Sapphire. Like I was like, oh, I just Tremaine the Tamatoas because that's how you always played the matchup. But it's like now there's a Maui Shark down, and he's got a Tala next to it. I don't really know where we're going with this. And then you want to bounce the Tremaine, and yeah, it's really quite changed for the deck this set, and maybe that's why only the tryhards like Ed, who are very very good at it, are getting the really good results. But I think you really got to make it for the event these days. Like if you're going to make it for a store champs, you got to really think about what you expect to see. Of course, Ed did that as well for Continentals. He expected a lot of Ruby Sapphire, so he built his particular list.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point where Lorcana's got into now, but there's actually, we're still in a very limited card pool, but there's still enough choices per major ink combination where you can be reorganizing the deck to fit the meta, fit the local meta, fit the expected meta for whichever event you're going to. And in store champs, you have near perfect information of the kind of decks that people bring to these events, so you could actually really change your deck to get a significant advantage for you to win these events.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to a point that Sky made on the last video. So anyone check that out who didn't watch that one. He included like a certain amount of copies of Jim Hawkins, didn't he? And he said he played one Steel song in the entire room, and that was like the last round when he was out of the event anyway. So he was like, so I had like a 3 or 4x of a dead card in my deck, like because that was generally only in there to deal with daisies and big health characters in that deck. So he was like, yeah, it was kind of worthless to have that. Whereas that could have been teched in for another card. It could have been
Text for red
like
blue.
maybe not
Yeah.
Calhoun, but another. Yeah, he could have put something in there for red blue because there was a big percentage of red blue. But he didn't. He kept it in there for the Steel Song, and that was just, that's how it goes sometimes when you try and
Well, I
predict an
think
event.
he said the
So
one
yeah,
thing
we're
he
at that.
regretted was that he didn't try more to predict the event. He was trying to fit his deck to match every possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, instead of going in on one, going like, all right, I think I can beat these decks and get my
Mm.
2-0s here. He went, how does this, yeah. And that's kind of where I've tried to be at as well now, where even with building this aggro-based blue steel and people like asking me questions, like, how's it doing to this match? I'm like, oh no, you're
Yeah.
probably going to lose that one. But, you're 2-0 this one, and you're 2-0 that one, and it's kind of a meta call on the day, and you hope you get your pairings right. And that's kind of how Lorcana feels, especially in the 2-0
Mm.
best of 2 format, doesn't it? It's like you just have to be like, I need a good run. I need to get the 2-0s in these matchups. Yeah, this deck does bad into certain matchups, or I can
Yeah,
1-1
in
those
two-game
matchups.
format, you sort of want the polarizing matchups that you can securely get the 2-0s, and then you just hope you can pilot your way into 1-1s out of the bad matchups.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, sometimes as well, I remember you come away and like, oh great, I got a 1-1 there, and it's like, yeah, because that's probably the best result. Like a 2-0 would be amazing, but you know your deck maybe doesn't have the capability for it, and then the next round you get paired into your polarizing matchup that you can 2-0.
And if you get a
And
1-1, you feel
yeah,
bad
that's
because you're like, that should have been a 2-0. And I feel like that's sort of where you need to look at it. Like, if you get
oh
a
yeah.
1-1 into a good matchup, maybe you feel bad then. But if you get a 1-1 into a bad matchup, you should feel great because you just avoided an 0-2, right? That would have knocked you out of a running, possibly.
Yeah, for sure. And as well, your opponent will be thinking, great, this is one of my
Yeah.
2-0 matchups where I can take a 2-0 from this. So that's how that two-game format has been feeling for me.
Well, okay, so we've covered sort of the major decks of store champs. We talked a little bit of our feelings around store champs. Would you say that, especially for us in Europe, who haven't had a major event since EU champs now, NA champs just had their event, so they haven't had to sit with this feeling yet. But with no
Oh, yeah.
announcements of this year's DLCs on the horizon, aside from the Australian one happening, where are we at with competitive Lorcana? Because I know me personally, I need that fire in my belly. I need that motivation to prep for an event and have a distinct goal set in mind. But with really like nothing set in mind, I'm sort of just like I feel too chill. Like I want to grind, I want to play for an event, but I don't even know when the next event is.
Yeah, I was kind of grateful that we got our Continentals first because I just
Yeah,
wanted to get it done. But as you say, yeah, like they had that long time and then they had the event and now they're kind of like, well, our big event was only like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. So
and
it's
we go
kind of
straight
fine
into
for them,
store
but
champs. Yeah,
we it was really nice. It had been really nice to, yeah. I kind of am just focusing on store champs because I know once I pull my head up and stop thinking about them, it's like, oh, there's no DLC announced. Like I haven't booked any trips this year, which yeah, it's kind of upsetting because you've got nothing to work towards. Um, so it's kind of in that weird feeling. I'm really hoping that we, in the UK at least, we get some bigger events like America seems to have these winner case like 2K, 10K events that you see at like Charlie's Collectibles. It does like this 10K every year, or every set, and it does really well. And like they get like No I'm Not and Candio and all the big players in that area to turn up. In Europe, of course, we have like Law League in Italy that's really cool. I think there's some French
yeah,
ones
like
as well,
Lorca
and there's some
Quest.
German
Yeah,
ones. The UK, yeah, Lorcana Quest as well that goes to, which is like in Poland and stuff, which was where
no,
we
that's the
first met.
Enchanted Quest one. Lorca
Um,
Quest is the
what-
French one, and then the British one
oh, okay.
is you went to
We
Axiom.
get
That was it.
Axion.
Oh,
Yeah, I didn't go
yeah.
to Axiom, but we get that was on sometime. I think I was busy. I can't remember what I was doing, but yeah, we get Axiom. But I really would just like loads of third party events, and I think it'd be nice. Like I know Ravensburger sometimes helps these third party
Mm.
events with promos. They did with the Law League. They gave them promos and stuff like that, to help them out. To get some hype around the game. I think that's really good for them because they haven't got to run an event. They've just got to, give a little bit of support to these third
Yeah.
party people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, should we have a short one today? We sort of talked about the meta and our expectations.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm. It's a bit of a lull, and that may sound like I'm down on the game, but I'm not. It's just like sort of a break period. I treat this as the vacation time, to get ready for next year's events. Because next year's events, I'm super pumped for. I'm really pumped to see what we get out of the Asian DLCs, the OCE DLC. Especially happy for Australia and New Zealand specifically to finally be getting competitive play because when I visited my family for Christmas a year ago back in New Zealand, I was sad to find at my local card store that they weren't even stocking Lorcana yet. So in just a year to go from that to having their first DLC is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know about that. Yeah. I think lows aren't that bad. Like as well, if you're 100% constantly playing Lorcana at the highest level, um, it's just gonna, just drain you. So like, take some downtime. Maybe if you still want to play Lorcana, play a bit more of a fun deck. Like I learn other TCGs in my downtime because I have nothing else to do with my life. So I've been focusing heavier on like One Piece and like the Pokemon Pocket
Mm.
game as well. But yeah, it does feel weird to not have an event to build towards. Maybe even just like in a few months. When is the Melbourne one as
February
well?
2nd. 1st and 2nd, I think. So it's in like 2 weeks.
February. Oh, that's cool. I mean, at least we have. At least that's what I was feeling with the NA Continental was like we had high play content to
Mm.
watch. Like we weren't playing it and we weren't building towards it, but at least we had some like still some things to watch and stuff. Is that going to be set
Yes.
6 as well in yeah, because I know the Asia one is still going through the
Yeah,
sets,
so
aren't they?
OCU's all caught up now.
Yeah.
They caught them up because I think they got stock around March of 2024, and then had just been catching up since then, getting like a set every 2 months. And I think they're going to do a similar thing with Asian DLCs of getting a set every 2 months, and catching them up in time for Worlds, for 2025 Worlds.
Okay. I remember when I was playing back in the it was some Discord where it would match you with people and you could play webcam games with them, and it was paired with like Australians. I used to get them because I think if I woke up early enough and played, there was still like midnight for them, and it was cool to watch them go through like learning the cards. Like they were playing decks, but like a deck that I'd have played at the start of the set, or like, and it was really cool to watch them go through all these cards and like learn which ones were good and not. So yeah, it's going to be really awesome to see where they're at as well. I know a lot of the big American players said they're going to fly over there because they really want to get another chance of getting into Worlds.
If I had like done well enough to get some money from NA Continentals, I would immediately be like, yo, where's my ticket to Melbourne? Because I want another chance of getting there.
Oh yeah.
Like, especially if I was a player that lost in top 16 and you're 1 win away, that'd be that's the reason I went to Seattle, right? And that's the reason I still went to Paris Champs, is because I was 1 win away in Birmingham from qualifying to EU Champs, and that just gave me the fire I needed to be like, all right, I'm investing money and time into this. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I had, so what I got from Continental was I thought, like, if I put all of that, it could have afforded the Melbourne thing, but then I've basically got nothing. I've just spent it all on Melbourne.
For the European DLCs. Like, for example, I've got nothing left for the European DLC, so I'm going to have to figure out another way to fundraise for
that. And then, like, but I think if I'd have got to top 16, like, I probably would have gone for it. And just the experience of going to Melbourne as well. I've never been to Australia.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's okay, yeah. Well.
Not as good as New Zealand, obviously. No, of course not.
No, it's not. No, it's the Kiwi Birds.
Well, not in Australia.
That's where the actual Kiwi Birds are.
In New Zealand, right?
No. Do you think as well, just to have one more point on it, do you think you're going to have a lot of Asian players travel to it? Because I remember in Pokemon, the Australia, New Zealand events were quite popular as well by Asian players that would, because it's not that far a trip from like Japan.
Not many. Mainly because they don't have the game yet. So it's only going to be the super dedicated players that like have already imported the European cards and have communities like those, like that community in the Philippines, like often there are in Singapore.
Exactly,
there might be a couple, like double-digit amount.
Yeah. If you're one of those Philippines players, which I just love that story, that like they buy the store champ stuff and send it there and have their own one. Like if you're that dedicated to do that, you might be dedicated enough to fly to Australia and compete in the DLC as well. That'd be really cool. It's like some real like really sweet
region even gets access.
Yeah, a really sweet like Disney. Yeah. You're not even in a region that has the game or like has a regional event and you've qualified for Worlds. That'd be so awesome. That'd be a real proper like Disney story,
magical,
wouldn't
it? Even.
Yeah, real magical story.
Alright, well, I think that about wraps it up for today. I hope you guys are feeling a little bit more prepared for your set champs meta. Maybe if you're struggling to know what to bring to your event, if it hasn't happened already, this gives you some ideas for how to take down that mat and that card. Me and Harlan are sitting pretty. We already have 1 mat and 1 card. Did you win any more mats, Harlan?
I got 2 cards. And no, my girlfriend got another mat.
Well, congrats to Ali. Ali Sweet. Is it not Ali Sweet? Well, your
Sweetie
name's Harlan Sweet.
It's Harlan Sweetie.
I'm going to keep calling you Harlan Sweet.
It's from World of Warcraft. Yeah, I know you are. I thought you were doing it as like a cute way of saying it, but it's Harlan Sweet.
Wouldn't you spell Sweetie with an IE? I think you've spelt your name wrong that you've used for 15 years.
It's from World of Warcraft, and now that I say it, I could even have been pronouncing the name wrong the entire time. But it's a character from that game. It's like one of the bosses in one of the dungeons. And I could even be wrong.
Is it from like the Edward Van Cleef dungeon, like the one near Stormwind?
It's from a dungeon in I think it's Battle for Azeroth.
Oh, I wouldn't know that.
And one store champs, I sat down and this guy sat down and said, "Oh, so you must be a fan of this?" And he said the dungeon's name. I forgot. Freehold.
Wait,
I
do know that one.
And it's like a piratey themed one. And I was like, yeah, because I didn't want to be rude, so I just said yeah. And then he noticed I had no idea what he was talking about. And then they was like, your name is from World of Warcraft. I was like, oh yeah, that's the dungeon's name, isn't it?
Yeah, okay, no, if it is that dungeon, I think it is sweet.
Yeah, it's the one at the end of the dungeon. He's like a dwarf, I think, or a gnome, and he's like a pirate king. I don't know. This is going way off track. If anyone's still listening, we're probably going to say our
But
goodbyes
yeah,
in a
no,
second.
I want to say, now that you've told me the backstory, I think you've been saying your name wrong. It is Harlan Sweet, not Sweetie.
I honestly really would have preferred I use my real name.
Just Adam Roper. Adam Roper's such a good
but
card
I'm
game.
stuck.
Then. You know, you're always roping, taking.
Oh, we're just.
Hearthstone reference.
Yeah, I mean, you bring that up. You love bringing that up every time. I guess it's fine to say my name. It was on the DLC.
I've given up on privacy.
The European Continental stream. You have, haven't you? Yeah. Oh yeah, yours. Yeah, yours was out there as well.
I was actually really upset the first time I went to an event because I've been doing a YouTube thing for about 6 months at that point, maybe, or 5 months, 4 months, and then just to see my name, my full government name going up just because I made top cut at a winner box. It's like, that feels like a bit of an invasion of privacy when my melee name is right there and you can just use that.
I did think that, like, does it not work better for them to use? Like, I guess because like Zach Bivens and like Ed side, like Zan's side, not Ed, Zan's side, like, I guess because that's the actual. I'm not saying I'm playing at that level, by the way, anyone. I'm just saying like names that people remember. I thought maybe it might have made more sense to use our names or the casters mention it, but that didn't really come across. I don't remember it happening for you.
Whatever. If a DLC is going to use my full name, use my full name. At that point, if you want people to be like athletes where they use their full name, cool. Because it's not an esport, technically, it's an in-person thing. I just don't think my local shop or winner box should be giving away my government name without my permission.
Oh, your
it was a
local
winner box in London.
shop did it?
Yeah, but it was like 64 people. Okay. I made top cut and I saw my government name blasted on a projector. I'm like, whoa, what is going on? But obviously that's normal if you're in card games, but I don't come from card game background. So it freaks me out.
Full government name. Yeah. No. Where's that? Because I got a winner case or something, and when was it? Darksphere? I went with Lorcana villain. Can't remember them posting names or anything.
This was at Rule Zero, which now no longer does TCG events. It was like a cool cafe on the riverside.
Rule Zero never does. It's got it's the basement one where you. Do they not do TCGs anymore?
Yeah. It's quite sad. It was a really cool.
I remember venue. I had to pick up some people's product there once before I went to drop it off at an event. Yeah.
Right,
Oh, that's
Shall
cool.
we end the podcast? We've rambled on a bit.
Yes, we are rambling here. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you for
All
watching.
right, guys.
Good luck in your set champs. And if you want to leave anything in the comments, let us know how you did at your set champs and what deck you brought, because we'd love to know if we're wrong about the meta. So you can.
Yeah. I was just gonna roll up. Yeah, I was gonna say it'd be awesome to see, and like on my channel as well. I'm just doing lots of videos on the Sapphire Steel aggro list, like guides and stuff like that. So definitely check them out if you want to. If you want to play this degenerate deck, you're welcome to.
And with that, bye-bye.